Welcome back. This week, an intense political battle started after the passing of U.S. Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia. Republicans lining up to say that this is a presidential year, so we're going to wait for a new president and a replacement should not be nominated. The president saying it is his duty to nominate someone. To sparked a whole lot of discussion. I'm going to bring in former Chief Justice of the New Hampshire Supreme Court, John Broderick. Your Honor, good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, Josh.
First, let's start with how quickly the political back and forth started. Were you bothered by that?
I was, to be honest. Justice Scalia was a giant in constitutional law and is widely regarded, whether you agreed with his philosophy or not. He applied it pretty consistently, and he gave 30 years of his time to the United States Supreme Court. And I felt badly that we couldn't give him a funeral before we started talking about what would follow. And I think the country should just exhale for a bit.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure that's going to happen.
And he was on the bench for a very long time. He was there for a lot of important decisions. What kind of legacy do you think he leaves behind?
Well, I think Justice Scalia, was an originalist, as he describes it, which means that he always tried to find the original intent of the framers, and he tried to surround that with the history of the time that the Constitution was written and adopted. He was a great dissenter, as we know. He had a very sharp mind and sometimes an even sharper pen. But he, I think, was a conscience of conservative jurists and conservative Americans. And I didn't always agree with his opinions, Josh.
Sure.
But I always respected him. And I've had occasion twice to spend a little time with him. He was a very gracious man. I really liked him personally. And I'm saddened by his passing, to be honest.
Yeah, and obviously people are looking back at his time on the bench and his life. But the political rhetoric quickly overtook everything. You pointed this out. A lot of people were put off by it. That might be a mild term. How have things changed when it comes to the Supreme Court and the political world from the time that he was nominated, which was unanimously, by the way?
Yeah, isn't that amazing? In 1986, Justice Scalia, nominated by Ronald Reagan, was confirmed unanimously by the United States Senate. Today, if the Democrats control the Senate, he might not get out of a hearing, but he'd have a hearing. What I hope the country realizes is President Obama has an obligation under the Constitution to nominate someone. The Senate has an obligation under the Constitution to advise and consent, and that would mean you hold a hearing. Doesn't mean you approve the nominee. You might vote no at the hearing level. The Senate itself might vote no, but at least the process is allowed to work. And so I think when we short-circuit it or say that the president shouldn't be nominated, the Constitution, ironically, Justice Scalia would say, I think, it says the president gets to nominate if there's a vacancy. It doesn't say if he's only in his first term, if he's exceptionally popular. It's his job under the Constitution to do it, and it's the job of the United States Senate to consider the nominee.
And something struck me right before we started taping here. You're like, obviously, proportionally, the Supreme Court hears very few cases compared to the number that they actually apply. And you said, wait, what if somebody finally gets there, something that's built their whole life around, and there's a 4-4 vote because Washington can't get out of its own way?
I mean, the Senate and the Congress are gridlocked. Let's not gridlock the Supreme Court of the United States. There are over 8,000 requests a year to have cases heard. They take about 100 of those cases, so they must be important at some level. In one year, recent year of the Supreme Court, there were 25 out of about 100 opinions that were 5-4 opinions. Those cases likely would have been 4-4. And so at the end of a long and expensive process, Josh, to have your case heard, and the Supreme Court comes back after you spent all that time and money, and they say, we're 4-4, we really can't help you, sorry.
Right.
I don't think that's beneficial to the country, regardless of your political party.
In terms of the process, though, is there anything that can be done? Is this just the world that we live in now? I mean,
sadly, I think it is, Josh, and I don't think it's good. And, you know, I'm a lifelong Democrat. If George Bush, the son, were president, and this had happened, and he was in his last year, I would be here telling you the exact same thing. Because it's not about politics, it's about making the Constitution real. And I think the country just needs to let the process unfold and not short-circuit it.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. We have less than 2 minutes to go, but I want to ask you about, I mean, any young attorney must go through the law books late at night, whatever, and dream of a day, of one day being considered or nominated for the U.S. Supreme Court. What type of, I mean, is it like that, or is it a certain type of individual? I mean, you obviously held the chief position of the highest court of land here in New Hampshire.
It's an enormous privilege. and it's an enormous responsibility. And so there are some trade-offs. Obviously, your life is different. You're a little more reclusive than you might otherwise be. Your relationships change. You can't have an expressed opinion outside of a written opinion. But I think anyone interested in the law and its evolution would love that job. I mean, it's a tremendous honor.
Quickly, I want to go off topic. We have about 30 seconds. You've been active in your concern for the future of the New Hampshire primary, as have a lot of people.
Yes.
How do you think things stand now? This was an energetic primary, to say the least.
Well, it is. I'll tell you what concerns me, Josh. The establishment tends to decide who will have the primaries and what order.
Right.
The establishment was not on Donald Trump's side, and they weren't on Bernie Sanders' side. And if it turns out that they are not the nominees of their respective parties, the establishment might later say, why are we using New Hampshire anymore? Doesn't make sense. I hope that doesn't happen.
I hope so, too, but there are a lot of voters here that certainly were engaged and did what they see as their civic duty.
It's an amazing state.
It is. Senator, Your Honor, good to see you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Josh, very much.
That's going to wrap up this edition of Close Up. Thanks very much for watching. Of course, we'll be back here next week. Stay warm. Have a great Sunday.